This time we will call a meeting of the Board of License Commissioners to order. It's been tradition for many, many years that we begin our meetings with the pledge to the flag and observe a moment of silence in memory of all those who have given of their supreme sacrifice to make our country great and as free as it is, strictly voluntary. At this time, I would ask Commissioner Barnhart if he would lead the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would ask our attorney, Mr. Dixon, if he will call our first case, number 6251, please.
All right, case 6251, a Class A beer, wine, and liquor license issued to Rajanakant Patel for the use of Shree Liquors LLC, trading as Carroll Liquor, 6 East Ridgeville Boulevard, Mount Airy, Maryland, 21771. Violation hearing, 2 sales to a minor. In the file of this matter, we have the following documents. November 13th, 2020 letter from Joe Vance to Mr. Patel, or Patel, R. Patel. There's a September 18th, 2020 letter from Kelly S. Miller to the board. Acknowledged receipt of letter, August 6th, delivered by hand on August 7th, 2020. There's an August 6th, 2020 letter from Joe Vance to Rajanakant R. Patel. And then there is there's an August 5th, 2020 alcohol compliance violation sheet written out and completed by Inspector Keith Benfer. That's a 2-page document. There is a notice of violation for selling alcohol to persons under 21 on the stationery of the state's attorney, Brian L. DiLeonardo, and signed by Rohit Patel. There's a vertical driver's license of the volunteer. Shows that the person is under 21 until July 2021. There's a photograph of the volunteer outside the store with a 24 case of Corona Extra. I would ask that the file be entered into evidence.
We'll accept that into evidence. At this time, I would assume that Inspector Benfer will be presenting the case.
County Attorney Jim Allman is going to be presenting the case for the county.
Mr. Allman?
Yes, good morning.
You may proceed.
Thank you, and good morning, Commissioners. My name is James Allman, and I'm on behalf of Liquor Inspector Mr. Benfer. Both Mr. Benfer and I have been working with Defense Counsel Schaefer Miller on a resolution to both cases 6251 and 6265, which both involve Carroll Liquors. Ms. Schaefer has spoken to and advised her clients, and we have reached an agreement on these two matters. That agreement being a 3-day suspension of the liquor license plus a $4,000 fine. The parties have also agreed on a joint statement of facts, which I believe the board has with them this morning. Ms. Schaefer again has spoken and advised her clients on this joint statement of facts, and they have accepted. The parties believe that we have come to an acceptable agreement without the need for a formal hearing with these two matters involving Carroll Liquors, and we respectfully request that the board accept this agreement.
Commissioners, you have heard the proposed agreement between the parties and the involving both case 6251 and 6265. Is there other information that is available that we need?
Sir, I would just like to read into the record the joint statement of facts, if that is okay.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
I would just like to read into the record the joint statement of facts.
Okay,
That's not really necessary. We could just call this Joint Exhibit 1, and all the board members have it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if we're not going to read into the record the agreed statement of facts, then I want to make a motion for a brief recess to get legal advice of counsel. And also I would ask that Joe Vance, if she could, get us the file, the case 6091 with the same licensee. It was a violation for sharing alcohol and not with another establishment and not keeping proper records. I would just like to look at the order in that case.
you have requested that we adjourn for legal advice in addition to review the case number that you cited. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Be case 6091. That was heard August 8th, 2018. It is briefly mentioned in the agreed statement of facts. However, there's some information in that file that's not in the agreed statement of facts that I would like to review.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second that, Chairman.
Motion's been properly made and second that we adjourn to review the case number as stated and the statement of facts. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We will adjourn at this time for legal advice to further move on the case.
Mr. Chairman, can I just
apologize. The $4,000, Mr. Dixon, we had not discussed specifically how that would be allocated, but yes, there is the $2,000 limit per violation. So it would be split up between at least split between the two cases if that's how the board would wish to handle it. And the 3-day suspension that we had discussed with Mr. Alman and Mr. Benfer would be a long weekend in January.
Any further discussion or questions before we adjourn for legal advice?
No, sir.
Now that that's cleared up, we stand adjourned for legal advice. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back in session. As previously mentioned, we adjourned to receive legal advice. And at this time, we're back in regular session.
I provided the board legal advice as far as the statement of facts and the plea agreement. And we also got into the issue of revocation of a license and the grandfathering in of as to how that applies to the grandfathering in of an establishment.
We find this is a very serious case, and that this time we will discuss the merits of the case.
Well, Mr. Commissioner, one of the, obviously, as you mentioned, this is very serious and very disconcerting on many levels. One level for me is that this licensee has previously, to the charges, shown, in my opinion, a fair disregard for the rules and regulations of this board, this county, and actually the state. And I'm referring specifically to a violation in connection with transfer of liquor from one location to another, which is against the rules. And also failure to keep records. And this is back in a hearing on August 8th, 2018. And I feel that that is indicative that perhaps this licensee doesn't take seriously obligations of a licensee in this county. That was the start of that was a jump off point for me in considering what to do in this case. And I look back at that time, we were fairly, in my opinion, fairly lenient. He was fined $500 for transferring liquor from one location to another and $500 for failure to keep records, which are both important obligations of any licensee of any liquor store. And now, Mr. Chairman, we have this situation of two cases that are before us today. And the way I look at it, we have four separate violations that we're considering. In the first case, case 6251, there are two sales to a minor. Even though it's two different transactions, it was during one compliance check by our inspector. So those are two violations in that case. And in the second case, there are two violations. Illegal conduct, which is Rule 7, and a violation of Rule 63, peace and safety of the community. In both of those cases, we haven't discussed yet, but they are mentioned in the agreed statement of facts. And it seems like there is a fair amount of community recognition that this particular licensee regularly provides sales of alcoholic beverages to minors, and is known for doing so, has a reputation for doing so, and has raised the interest and the concern of a number of parents who report a number of violations, as well as the law enforcement community in Mount Airy. I'd be interested in hearing any other comments from any other commissioner on this.
Well, Mr. Commissioner Barnhart, I feel that it's not a right but a privilege to have a liquor license extended to you. And I feel this licensee has blatantly ignored the liquor board rules of Carroll County and has also put the community and minors, have jeopardized the safety and well-being of those in the community. So I also take this as probably the most serious case that we've had in a long time. This establishment's been well known for selling to minors. We've had at least 4 parents come to the different law establishments and complain about their kids being served alcohol in 5 different cases. And the fact that Mr. Inspector Benfer had our gentleman go in there and buy liquor, and right after that, they sold it again to another minor right after our volunteer was served. So it's a blatant disregard of the rules of liquor board rules in Carroll County.
I agree with everything that has been said. I can't understand how a person would be culpable of a violation of sales to a minor, and actually before the inspector has a chance to get in the car and leave the same date, that same establishment would sell again to a minor 15 minutes later, which indicates to me, based upon the statement of facts that have been entered, it's a pattern that it seems this establishment specializes in selling to minors. I just think this case merits very, very serious consideration by this commission. I think that the plea agreement that has been offered, in my opinion, lacks seriousness of the charges that this establishment faces.
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment on this case?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Kelly Miller here on behalf of Carroll Liquors, and I do have Mr. Raj Patel with me as well. We've got a slight technical challenge in my office, so we will just take turns in front of the computer if that's necessary. Thank you for your consideration. I completely agree with you that these are very serious allegations. The allegations in case, I just want to make sure I get the cases correct, 6265 are allegations that we would absolutely contest, and I'll speak about that in just a quick second. But in 6251, that we are not contesting. And that was a very, I mean, not to diminish it, but that was a terrible day at Carroll Liquors, okay? The 2 violations, there's no excuse for it. That employee was immediately terminated. It is absolutely not the policy of Mr. Raj Patel, the licensee, to allow that sort of conduct. And frankly, I spoke with the employee, and we sat down together and we said, what the heck happened? Okay, and there's no good explanation. That behavior cannot be tolerated and is not tolerated. The allegations in case 6265 are also incredibly serious. And I will tell you for a fact that when I first learned of them from Mr. Benfer, I immediately called the client and had a conversation and said, do you have any idea that this sort of activity is occurring, has been alleged to occur? And they said, absolutely not. We take this license so seriously. And then they proceeded to tell me, and obviously this would be a part of any more detailed hearing on the matter, but I'll give you a quick preview, which is they told me that they had one parent who confronted them at one point in time about a potential sale to a minor. They immediately checked surveillance videos. They showed a video to the parent of the person who conducted the sale. And that parent said, oh, well, that's not my child. So that situation was resolved. That was the only instance that they ever had knowledge or awareness that sales to minors were alleged to be occurring until this violation. If you look back at their past compliance checks, they have a pretty good history of the compliance checks. We are not negating the seriousness of case 6091 that you all discussed in asking Mr. Dixon for legal advice. That was a violation that occurred that you all discussed, found culpable, fined. Managers were immediately terminated. Policies were changed at the store. I understand your concern about this licensee, but I also want to tell you that Mr. Raj Patel is the owner of another pharmacy business as well. He is respected in the community, and he takes enforcement incredibly seriously. And although perhaps not immediately relevant to liquor board purposes, he has a history of reporting any incidents with the pharmacy directly to government agencies. He takes these sorts of enforcements incredibly seriously and was shocked by the behavior of the manager employee in this instance, hence the immediate termination. So I do not want you to think that this is a disregard for a license, because that is absolutely not the case. They do not believe that this is a right or privilege to hold a license. They completely understand that the importance of holding a liquor license. So I did just want to dissuade you from that. So with that, I just wanted to provide some background because I thought it was important for you to understand in kind of our plea agreement, if that's what you want to call it, was speaking with Keith, that this was not an easy case to look at. And in coming up with that, part of what we looked at is, if these events are in fact occurring, how do we make sure they never occur again? And so that is what was taken into consideration. The store already Tips and Tams certifies every employee. This was I know you hear it all the time and perhaps not relevant, but this was an employee who didn't do their job. He was trained. He had Tips and Tams training. He knew he was supposed to ask for an ID and he didn't. That was an incredible oversight. Why it happened, we have no idea, but it did. And so he was fired. It would have almost been easier if he had not been trained, because then there'd be a clear answer as to why he didn't ask for an ID, or why he failed to properly validate the ID. But in this case, he was trained. He was trained Tips and Tams, and he wasn't trained internally. He knew the store's policies, and he just completely disregarded them that day. So that was the background of what went into my discussions with Mr. Benfer and Mr. Allman, and my client's consideration of this as well. So I just wanted to provide that information to you, and we are here and happy to answer any specific questions that you might have as well.
Ms. Miller, let me ask you a question. How many people does Mr. Patel have working for him?
I believe there are 3 people that work at this location, Carol Liquors.
So we're getting complaints from various parents. I know 4 at the start that complained about it. There may be more, I don't know. So you're telling me that all these sale to minors, they were all being done by that one individual, or are all 3 of these people selling to minors?
Mr. Harmoning, that was the first question that we asked ourselves. We said, okay, these are the allegations. First of all, let's assume they're true, okay? What's the employee issue? And I spoke with Mr. Benfer. Part of the problem was an inability to pull surveillance videos, because by the time we learned of this allegations, we weren't able to pull any surveillance to try to see, because that was our first goal, was identify which employee was an issue, if in fact that is the case. And the most, I'm sure Mr. Benfer might be able to speak a little more specifically, but the most concurrent or similar fact that these people were sharing about who was the problem was that it was the old guy manager. That's what we were told. And so Mr. Rohit Patel is the older gentleman who works in the store predominant hours, okay, most of the time. And so after having a discussion with all employees at the store, the owner identified that obviously he made the 2 sales on under case 6251. So for that alone, he was being terminated. But then once we learned more details of these other allegations, that also pointed to that employee. So that's why we came to that determination, Mr. Harmoning.
So you're, in essence, you're telling me that it's probably from the same server, the same person working that's doing all these sale to minors. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Well, to the extent we're not, I mean, I would still contest the sales to minors that are being alleged against us as a result of the other case number. But I would say that the similar fact that was in those cases was an older gentleman, and because that was the same older gentleman that was responsible for the violations in case 6251, it was an automatic termination, no matter what.
Okay.
Ms. Kelly, just one question. You can answer yes or no. Is not the licensee totally responsible for the actions of that store?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller, I have a question. We haven't called, by the way, we haven't called case 6265 yet, but we are discussing it. And you indicated that you would contest the two violations that are set out in that case, which I guess involve all these prior sales to minors in the community and the reputation for such. Basically, what would your contest be based on? Why would you contest that? What information do you have that we should have?
Mr. Barnhart, I have the same information you have, which in my opinion comes from, I wouldn't even necessarily call them witnesses because we don't have the minors available to testify, which would potentially be a part of that case if that were tried. But what we have are allegations coming from third parties from minors who in my opinion, lack credibility. The minors are either conducting an illegal activity by trying to buy alcohol, or I believe in one of the allegations, someone had turned 21. But either way, they are speaking to illegal activity. And so we are getting a third party account from an already unreliable source that no one has had the opportunity, in my knowledge, no one has investigated and spoken with any of these minors. So I understand that. I think that the transfer of ownership occurred in 2017 of May. So it's also possible that some of these allegations were spanning from actions prior to that. And those we just wouldn't be able to speak to. But I would just need more information, Mr. Barnhart, to be able to directly address them.
Okay, and that's fair. But wouldn't you agree that these minors and the reports that we have telling their parents about these purchases, you say they lack credibility because these were illegal activities, but they're also a statement against interest to your own parents. Doesn't that lend some credibility to it? Telling your parents coming clean, doesn't that kind of make it sound credible?
I would not disagree with you, Mr. Barnhart. That may lend some credibility to it. I just have a question of the multiple layers of communication, I guess, and that's something I think that would warrant getting down more into the meat if that was, if we proceed forward.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. There's several levels of hearsay here, but I think based on advice from counsel that this board can accept hearsay if we feel that it is reliable to a reasonable degree. And you probably agree with that too, Ms. Miller. But I agree with you about the digging down into the several levels of hearsay that we have. I agree.
Ms. Miller, how often is Mr. Patel in his store? Since he has a pharmacy, I would assume that would take a lot of his time.
Mr. Harmoning, I asked him that question and I'm happy to answer. I'm also happy to call him over to the computer, but when he and I first spoke, that was one of my questions to him. And he indicated that during COVID, it's been slightly less frequently, but now as a result of these incidences, has returned to approximately once a week.
Well, in the community of teenagers, news gets around very quickly. And this seems like it has become a hotbed for sale to minors, where a minor can go and get alcohol. it just blows my mind that he would not know what was going on there. Maybe it's because he hasn't been there much. Maybe it's because it's one employee that's doing all of this. I'm not sure. But the end result is the licensee is the responsible individual, and he needed to take care of his business.
Mr. Harmoning, I agree with you. And as I stated to Mr. Browning, the licensee is responsible, and he fully acknowledges that. And as soon as we learned of these allegations, he did take responsibility and has taken actions at the business. This was, I mean, I don't know how to say this other than saying that I trust my client. I've represented him for a few years now, and he tells me that they had no knowledge that this was happening at the store. They had heard past incidences at the previous ownership. And so they had taken the role of training their employees, requiring TIPS or TAM certification, and taking what they thought was every precaution possible to make sure employees were engaging in the appropriate conduct. But evidently, as a result of case 6251, at least, that didn't happen. So the most, he could do in that situation personally is fire that employee, which was obviously the immediate response. Now, I also understand that this board has worked with the state's attorney's office to take separate, to potentially take separate actions against individuals responsible. But I agree with you. A licensee is the responsible individual before this board. And I would submit to you that Mr. Patel has taken actions. I know I've said it to all of you before, so it's not news, but you can have a perfectly trained employee who one day decides he totally disregards all of his training. And apparently that's what happened here. I'm not saying that's an excuse, but I'm saying that from the perspective of a business owner, you can do everything right and you hit one day with your employee and there it all goes. So I would ask you to take that into consideration and the seriousness with which the licensee truly takes this into consideration as well.
So Mr. Patel can tell us under oath that he has never had a complaint from anyone in the community about his establishment selling to minors. Is that correct or not correct?
Before we do this, Ms. Kelly, Ms. Vance, please swear in anyone who intends to testify in this case. Please stand and raise your right hand. Anyone who intends to testify. Can we see your client?
Can you see him?
Yes.
Ask him to
Ms.
raise
Vance?
his right hand.
Yes.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
So Mr. Patel, if you could tell us in person, well, not in person, but directly from you, that no one in the community has ever complained to you or your store about them selling to minors.
They're asking you, have you ever received a complaint about sales to minors?
From the community, anyone in the community.
No.
Can you say it loud?
He said no.
Please,
Okay.
Ms. Kelly, have him state his name and address for the record, please.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Patel, can you state your name, spell your name?
My name is Rajini Patel, Radani Patel, 1080 Barbary Road, Westminster, 21057.
So Mr. Benfer, has there been any written statement of any parents or anyone in the community directly saying they called that establishment to complain?
I do not believe so, but I am in the midst of checking my paperwork just to verify.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Miller, I keep going back to the hearing that we held on August 8th, 2018 with this licensee. I had referenced it earlier, and you indicated that you have represented this licensee previously. Were you counsel at that hearing? Do you recall?
I was not counsel at that hearing. I began representation very shortly thereafter that hearing. That they were represented by Michael Ritchie at that hearing, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I still, while I have my microphone unmuted, I still, while I appreciate your arguments and your points, I still am seeing a pattern of conduct, which is, to me, is the foundation of my problem with this licensee. It might be his stores, his employees, but nevertheless, going back to 2018, and the facts in that case, which I found very unsettling, the facts in this case, at least to the extent that there's a agreed statement of facts, just shows me a pattern of disregard for following our rules or ensuring that our rules are followed, as well as the rules of the state and the comptroller's office.
Mr. Barnhart, I understand that concern. And although I did not represent the client at that time, I did, obviously review that case as well. I would say to you, again, not as an excuse for case, I believe it was 6091, but more so just to bring to your attention, it's been approximately 2 years in between the two cases. Those managers were immediately fired from both of the alleged, the violating locations, if you will. That Mr. Patel was unaware that happened, and also implemented training policies, whether you think it's necessary or not, implemented training policies where it's made very explicit to employees that no transfer of inventory from anywhere can occur. You can never accept inventory from any location but your direct distributor. So that, I don't know that that's something that employees are regularly trained in at every location, but I know for a fact that that's now the policy at Carroll Liquors. So although that case was very serious, I understand this board took it very seriously. I will say that concern was shared by Mr. Patel, and he has done everything in his power to ensure that that never would happen again. And I think, I hope that you can see that from the history since then. This location, I don't think it should be taken too lightly that this location has a history of positive compliance checks, which also is part of the reason he truly was unaware that this issue of sales to minors was being alleged, may or may not have been happening, because he was aware of the history of positive compliance checks.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, Ms. Miller. There is, I think they had 5 successful consecutive compliance checks since 2017. At least that's what my notes indicate. Can you ask your client, what's the name of the manager at his store involved in the 2018 case? The name of the manager who was fired?
Well, it was Ruchi Patel.
What is?
I'm sorry, you cut out there on me, Mr. Barnhart.
I'm sorry. Can you spell that for me, or have your client, the first name?
Yeah.
I know the last name.
Let me, is it R-U-C-H-I? R-U-C-H-I.
And is that short for something?
Is that an abbreviation? No, that's it. And she's female, correct?
Yes, female.
Yes,
And her husband is Pulin Patel?
that is
P-U-
correct.
And can you ask the licensee if he knows where Pulin Patel or Ruchi Patel is now employed?
Yeah, let me. He's not aware of if they do or do not work at any other store.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Miller, was this employee the only one working that evening during these violations?
Yes, Mr. Harmony, the violations in case 6251, yes, it was just Mr. Rohit Patel.
Okay.
So I guess I have a question for Mr. Dixon or for the chairman. Since we haven't called the second case yet, should we call it in connection with any discussion on the agreed statement of facts, since the agreed statement of facts involves both cases?
Okay, I'll read that case into the record. Case 6265, a Class A beer, wine, and liquor license issued to Rajan Kant Patel for the use of Shri Liquors LLC, trading as Carroll Liquors, 6 East Ridgeville Boulevard, Mount Airy, Maryland, 21771. Violation hearing, violation of Rule 7, illegal conduct, and Rule 63, peace and safety of the community. In the file of that matter, we have a November 13th, 2020 letter from Joe Vance to R. Patel. Acknowledged receipt of letter dated September 15th, 2020, delivered by hand on September 15th, 2020. September 15th, 2020 letter from Joe Vance to R. Patel. And a inspector's report for licensee and Board of License Commissioners signed and completed by Keith Benfer. With the violation 7, illegal conduct, and 63, peace and safety of the community. It's a multiple page document. It includes emails from citizens, email from a council member in Mount Airy, I would ask that the file be entered into evidence.
We'll accept that into evidence.
Mr. Dixon, is this a contested, is this contested, is that correct?
Well, they were both cases are subject to this, the plea agreement and the statement of facts that were introduced at the beginning of this hearing.
Okay, because I thought Ms. Miller said that 6251 was not contested and 6265 is contested.
Mr. Harmoning, that is accurate. We had discussed the plea agreement, again, for lack of a better term, with Mr. Benfer and Mr. Alman about both cases. The intent would be to consolidate the two cases if that were accepted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Miller, if we do not accept the agreed statement of facts and the plea agreement and make a alternate suggestion, you of course would have at that time the right to withdraw the agreed statement of facts. You understand that? Or am I right about that? I'll throw that to council as well.
I see Mr. Alman nodding, but yes, I do agree with you, Mr. Barnhart. We, although obviously a lot of thought and time was put into the plea agreement, the $4,000, and I'm happy to get into a little more specifics on that. But if this board is inclined to propose an alternate suggestion, we are prepared today, to make an agreement on that, if that is how the board is inclined to act. If this board is inclined to proceed towards a hearing on both, but truly on the contested matter, then we would ask that you postpone that hearing and we would prepare for that accordingly. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm prepared to offer to the board and to council my thoughts on a motion that I would make. And perhaps at that point, unless there's an objection of any commissioner, it might be appropriate for you, Ms. Kelly, to either confer with your client or maybe you already have the parameters of what you will accept or not. But at any rate, before making a proper motion, I think it's appropriate that I just let you know what I would make. And so give you an opportunity to think about it and discuss it.
Thank you.
With regard to the two cases, yeah, I do, I consider them to be consolidated for the purposes of this hearing and for the purposes of the agreed statement of fact. I find in the agreed statement of fact and also in the lengthy report submitted by Inspector Benfer that there's evidence to support the violations in case 6265, which is illegal conduct and peace and safety of the community. And I think clearly there's evidence to support the two sales to minors in case 6251. So rather than make a formal motion, I'll just let you know that I would shortly propose that the licensee be fined a maximum for the 4 violations, which is $2,000 each, which is a total of $8,000. And while I was at one time considering making a motion for a revocation, I have, at least at this point, stepped back from that because of legal advice that we got about the consequences. And I would instead, though I'm not making it now, but I would, after you confer with your client, add into my motion that the license be suspended for a period of 30 days, beginning December 20th, extending 30 days December 20th, 2020, going into 30 days into January, which I don't have a calendar, but it might be January 20th, 2021. That's a motion that I would make. And I feel that, I had away from revocation, which I think could be justified, but perhaps not having listened to your to the points that you made. I also think that maybe our inspector or this board could file additional charges based on the complaints of the parents in Mount Airy. I'd like to get a little more research on that and maybe talk to council a little bit more on that, but I think it's a possibility that perhaps if the licensee does not accept what might be my future motion, and we do go to a hearing, that might be on the horizon. So unless anyone else wants to opine or chime in or.
Well, Mr. Barnhart, Commissioner Barnhart, I think that's a fair motion if you do decide, or we do decide to make that motion. There are 4 violations here, in my opinion, also. The 2 sale to minors in 6251, and then violation of Rule 7 and 63 and 6265 case. And I think the maximum of 2,000 per violation is adequate for this instance, which would be the 8,000. And I think the 30-day suspension, probably lucky he didn't get more, and maybe in another county he probably would have gotten more than that. But the 30-day, I also think is appropriate for this action. I mean, you got to realize that minors get alcohol. It affects them much differently than adults. It puts the whole community in jeopardy. The safety of the community has to come in. In fact, parents, the home family association with kids that have alcohol. It's something very serious, and regardless of whether you're there at your establishment all the time, you're the licensee holder, you need to make sure, absolutely sure, that that's not happening in your facility. There's plenty of establishments in Carroll County that don't ever have violations to sale to minors. How are they able to do it? And Carroll Liquors isn't. So I think that motion is certainly fair in this instance, Commissioner Barnhart.
I think that Commissioner Barnhart has made some very valid points. In my estimation, this is very, very serious, the allegations that have been made. Irrespective or irregardless of any comments that can be made, the licensee is responsible for the operation of that establishment, irregardless whether he's there a day a week, a day a month, or a day a year. It seems to be a pattern here. And I don't mind telling you, my initial reaction after hearing the testimony a few minutes ago would be very much in line with Commissioner Barnhart when we talk about revocation. So with those comments, I would offer you to consider that and discuss it with your client if you so choose.
Thank you. I will absolutely take the opportunity to discuss it with my client if that's all right with this board.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we, Mr. Dixon, while she discusses it with her client, can we move on to the next case, or do we simply wait?
Kelly's representing the next case.
Well, perhaps Mr. Benford can do a little song and dance while we're waiting. There's one thing on the business agenda here I think we probably can take up at this time is approval of minutes of the November 18th meeting, which everybody received. Is there any corrections or additions to those minutes?
I have none.
They look good to me, Chairman.
Okay. Dr. Benford, I assume this is just a point of interest, moving down to new business. Michael's Steak and Lobster House of Hampstead has gone out of a business and turned in their license?
That is correct. Because of COVID, they lost business and they could not stay financially solvent.
Mr. Brawning, if
Okay.
it's okay, I'm going to step away for a minute.
Be my guest. I guess we can discuss while she's away. The two pieces of legislation has been will be presented to the legislature. The first one about delivery services to continue. Commissioners, do you have any specific comments in regards to that legislation?
Is that being continued after the state of emergency is gone?
That's gonna be a new state law for delivery and carry out, yes.
I did not see any benefit from it after the state of emergency. I think we should go back to status quo in that regard.
I would agree with Mr. Barnhart. I don't think that's needed. I don't even know if they did allow delivery service or not. A couple places I talked to said they didn't do very much at all.
Right.
So would it be appropriate that this commission draft a letter to be sent to all of our delegates and senator
Yes.
stating our opinion?
Yeah, I think I agree.
So we'll do that. And the second piece is something new here. This has been thought about for many years, to sell beer and wine in grocery stores.
I am not for that.
Yes. I have not gotten the exact wording for it, but there's gonna be a state law allowing beer and wine to be sold at grocery stores. Don't have any much more information on it, but I know it's coming down the road.
Okay, until we get the legislation, we'll hold that in abeyance.
Mm.
And I see Miss Kelly is back, so we will revert back to cases 6251 and 6265. Miss Kelly?
Thank you. Thank you for providing us that time to talk about this. We understand the severity of the situation. And my client is certainly interested in working this out with to any extent possible. We are wondering if you would be inclined to grant some kind of, I guess, again, plea deal, accepting an $8,000 fine and a 30-day suspension starting from January 1st. And let me just as background, explain that this business, when it was transferred back in 2017, May of 2017, was taking a loss. And so it has taken the owners several years to get this business back up to speed and to the point where it's actually a truly, business again. So that's part of what went into the thought behind the $4,000 plea agreement. So if you would be inclined, we would appreciate you considering a January 1st 30-day suspension to allow the owner the opportunity to operate through the holidays. And mainly, I'll say to you, just from my own experience, that's not necessarily for the benefit of the profit through the holidays. That's for the benefit of customers not learning that this establishment is closed and then not coming back. So that's because of ramifications that it causes months beyond this, not just because it results in lost patronage during that time. If you are inclined, we would ask you to consider accepting the $8,000 fine and a 30-day suspension beginning on January 1st. So we would appreciate any comments that you might have on that.
Commissioner Harmening, Commissioner Barnhart, comments?
Well, obviously, we deliberately chose the dates of suspension to cover the holidays. Or it might be more appropriate to say I chose it because I think that the holidays are a time of profit, and I think the maximum fine of $8,000 perhaps is not enough, and that would be an additional burden that the licensee would have to bear for these violations. So that was a choice during the lucrative period. I'm interested in hearing what the other commissioners have to say in that regard.
Well, considering what this could have been and what we were discussing in the beginning about revocation, I still feel that this is a very fair solution or penalty for the seriousness of what's going on, not only in the community, but in the lives of the minors that are getting this alcohol, especially in this time of COVID when they have nothing else to do but sit home and drink. So I would be in favor of keeping the penalty the way we have designed it, the way Mr. Barnhart stated it. That's certainly better than revocation where we were going in the beginning.
Mr. Harmening and Mr. Barnhart, thank you for clarifying the thought process behind. I mean, obviously I understood that the thought was the holidays, but now that you've explained it, I just consulted with my client and he understands, and so we would respectfully accept the $8,000 fine and the 30-day suspension beginning on December, I believe you said 20th, Mr. Barnhart.
Yes, that was, and thank you, Ms. Miller, for the good representation that you provided your client and also your presentation to the board. At some point, Mr. Chairman, I guess I could make the formal motion, or if there's any further discussion, Chairman, you can direct which way you want us to go.
I think, in my opinion, the motion would be proper at this time.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would move that in the two cases before the board at this time, case 6251, case 6265, in connection with Carroll Liquors, that they be consolidated, that we accept the agreed statement of facts, and that based on the information in the file and the agreed statement of facts, that we assess a fine in those two consolidated cases in the amount of $8,000, which is broken down as $2,000 for each violation. There are 4 violations in the consolidated cases. And we further impose a sanction that the licensee, the license be suspended for this licensee beginning on January 20th, 2020.
December 20th.
I'm sorry, December 20th, 2020, extending for 30 days to whatever 30th day is into January. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I imagine perhaps it's January 2021.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second that, Chairman.
Motion's been properly made and seconded that we find the defendant culpable and issue a fine of $2,000 for 4 occurrences as specified in cases 6251 and 6265, and that the license be suspended beginning on December the 20th for a period of 30 days. Any further discussion on the motion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, opposed, no. So ordered. We find you culpable and issue a fine of $8,000 and a suspension of your license beginning on December the 20th, 2020 for a period of 30 days. You will have a period of 30 days in which to satisfy the fine upon receipt of the official notice of the action of this board. However, the suspension will begin on December the 20th, 2020 for 30 days. This concludes this case. Thank you all very much.
One more thing that we definitely need to consider is what time. We can't just say December 20th. We got to put midnight, 6 a.m. We got to put time for the beginning and the end of the suspension.
How about
Commissioner Harmon, you made the motion.
I'll make a motion that we suspend from 12 o'clock on the 20th of December to 30 days after that, midnight, 30 days after that.
is that 12 o'clock p.m. high noon?
No, that would be AM, I'm sorry. So we would be the first start of the 20th, which would be 12 o'clock AM to 30 days after that to 12 o'clock.
Okay, so I'm confused. Is it noon on December 20th or midnight?
No, he said 12:01 a.m.
AM, 12:01 AM.
Okay.
Is that agreeable, Commissioner Barnhart?
Yes. Yeah, I would second that motion.
I don't know whether we need a motion or not, but all those in favor of the motion, is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no, so ordered. 12:01 a.m., December the 20th is the beginning of the 30-day suspension. Any other questions? Hearing none, let's take a 5-minute break. I understand, Ms. Kelly, you're representing the next case.
Yes, thank you very much.
So let's take a 5-minute break so she can switch chairs.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back in session. At this time, Mr. Dixon, please call case 6285.
All right, case 6285, an application for the transfer of a Class A beer, wine, and liquor license to be issued to Rohit Patel from Sri Hari Inc. to SNP Westminster LLC, trading as Quick Stop Liquors, 332 140 Village Road, Westminster, Maryland, 21157 in Election District 7. In the file of this matter, we have the following documents. Notice, newspaper notice of public hearing, December 4th, 2020. Newspaper notice, November 27th, 2020. There is a response to Joe Vance's request to various state and local agencies from Andrea Hanley, Health Department. Looks like N/A, this establishment does not meet the requirements of this office. See the attached memorandum. Andrea Hanley, Deputy Director. The attached memorandum. There is a comment memo from Michael Zepp, Bureau Chief Code Official, and with the box checked, the above referenced establishment does meet the requirements of this office. There's a November 18th, 2020 letter from Connie Snooks, Revenue Specialist, to the board. There's a November 17th, 2020 letter from Joe Vance to Rohit Patel. There's a November 17th, 2020 memo from Andrew R. Gray, Comprehensive Planner, to Joe Vance about the liquor license. There is a response to Joe Vance's request to various state and local agencies from Robin Kiefer, Collections Office. With the box checked, the above referenced establishment does meet the requirements of this office. There's a November 10th, 2020 letter from Joe Vance to Miss Connie Snooks. There's a November 10th, 2020 letter from Kelly Schaefer Miller to the board. And the application includes workers' comp insurance, operating agreement, financial information, SDAT information, asset purchase agreement. I would ask that the file be entered into evidence.
We'll accept that into evidence. With that thought in mind, please call case 6285. And all those who intend to testify in 6285, please stand, raise your hand, and be sworn in by Ms. Vance. Ms. Vance? Joe? Inspector Benfer, can you
She is frozen right now. She's frozen.
can she come to your mic?
Okay, I'm at Charles. Do you
Okay.
swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Ms. Kelly, I believe you are going to represent the case. You may proceed, please. Your mic is off, Kelly.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Kelly Schaefer Miller here today on behalf of SNP Westminster LLC. They are the contract purchasers of Quick Stop. Where I'm hoping that this is an easy transfer case for you, because what we have going on here is that we are keeping the existing licensee on the license. So the request, I guess, really is to remove Ramachandra Patel from the license and ask that the license be in the name of just Rohit Patel, which it already is. So I do have Mr. Patel here to answer any questions. I'm happy to go through testimony with him to the extent you would like to hear, kind of the normal testimony from him as a licensee again. I will just preliminarily state that the business is being sold, but there's no changes to the business that are going to happen here. There's no, structural improvements. The floor plan is not going to change. It will be an assignment of the existing lease. They're intending on keeping the existing employees. They already have, the same sort of training and requirements that they have in place now is what they intend to carry forward with, requiring employees to be TIPS and TAMP certified and internal training. They do have a store policy that they do not accept vertical IDs, and that they also intend to maintain that. So if you would like to hear from Mr. Patel, I am happy to. I'm fully prepared to ask him the normal questions that I would if you so care to hear.
Commissioners, your thoughts?
I trust that Ms. Miller has provided the commission with all the information we need in our file. And I also, since this is an existing licensee, I would leave it up to Ms. Miller if she wishes to put it onto the record. I personally don't need it. I think he's a fit and proper person from everything I can gather. But that's just my thought.
Mr. Barnhart or Harmony?
Ms. Miller, who was the licensee prior to Mr. Rohit?
I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head, Mr. Harmoning. I can ask Mr. Rohit if he's aware. He's been the licensee for some years now,
Okay.
but I can ask him if he knows who was prior to him, if you'd like.
Okay, I was just wondering, and I see that they did have a sale to minor back in July 15th of this year.
Yes, they did.
He was the licensee on that?
Yes, he was the licensee at that time, and currently until, hopefully this approval happens today. There are two licensees. So it's Mr. Rohit Patel and Mr. Ramachandra Patel are the licensees. And yes, they both were present and appeared at that hearing. I did not represent them at that hearing, but I did speak with them about that.
Okay, could you ask if they had made any changes in policies from that date to now?
Yes. Would you like me to ask Mr. Rohit
Yes, please.
formally?
Yes.
He is. I know this is awkward, but forgive me
Sorry.
because my camera in my office has got a little messed up the other day. Sorry. Oh, this is like, that is, okay. Mr. Patel.
Yes.
You recall the violation of which Mr. Harmony is speaking.
That's good. Yes.
And did you appear in front of the board as part of that violation?
That was a virtual video.
But you were
Yes.
part of
Oh,
the
yes.
virtual
Oh,
conference?
yes.
What action did you take as a... Does that employee still work there?
Yeah.
Did you have some retraining of that
I
employee?
actually was the owner at that time.
Okay, so it was the owner. It was Ramachandra Patel who
Okay.
made the sale that day, Mr. Harmoning. If that answers the question.
Okay, great, thank you.
Ms. Kelly, could you have him state his name and address for the record, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Browning. This whole virtual thing really throws me off here. I apologize. Mr. Patel, can you please state your name, spell your name and your address?
Rohit Patel, ROHIT PATEL, 380 Snowfall Way, Westminster, Maryland, 21157.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller, so I think I understand what's going on. You're taking Ramachandra off. You're changing you're changing the corporate use entity, right? And then it looks like Harshad Kumar Patel is a 95% owner and Rahit Patel is the 1% owner with a $5,000 contribution. And Rohit is currently on the license now.
That's correct, Mr. Barnhart. Harshad Kumar, who goes by Harry, is the other individual that makes up S&P Westminster LLC, and he has a relationship with Mr. Rohit Patel to the extent that Mr. Patel agreed to stay on as the existing licensee.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
I have none.
No, I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Motion would be in order.
I'd make a motion. I make a motion that we approve the transfer Class A beer, wine, and liquor license to be issued to Rahit Patel from Shri Hari Incorporated to SNP Westminster LLC, trading as Quick Stop Liquors, 332 140 Village Road, Westminster, Maryland, Election District 7.
I second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion's been properly made and seconded that we approve the application as stated. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing
No.
none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. So ordered. Congratulations. Best wishes. We hope not to see the applicant in here for anything other than routine business. Congratulations and best wishes. And Ms. Kelly, thank you for bearing with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it, and we also hope to not see you for anything other than routine business. Have a happy holidays if I do not see you before.
Same to you, Ms.
Thank you
Miller.
very much. and
Thank
Same
you.
to you.
Thank you, Kelly.
At this time, I would ask Mr. Dixon if he would call case 6262. And before he does that, Mr. Dixon, we call these separately.
Yes, we'll do it separately.
6262, please.
All right, case 6262, a Class A beer, wine, and liquor license issued to Rick Estes for the use of Estes and Associates LLC, trading as Piper's Wine and Spirit Barn, 4127 Hanover Pike, Manchester, Maryland, 21102. Violation hearing sale to a minor. In the file of this matter, we have the following documents. A, November 13th, 2020 letter from Joe Vance to Rick Estes. A, notice of intention to defend with the box checked. I do not intend to contest the alleged violations. Signed September 10th, 2020. Looks like R. Estes. Acknowledge receipt of letter dated September 10th, 2020, delivered by hand on September 10th, 2020. There's a September 10th, 2020 letter from Joe Vance to Rick Estes. There is a alcohol compliance violation sheet dated September 8th, 2020 and completed by Inspector K. Charles K. There's on the State's Attorney's stationery, Brian L. DiLeonardo, notice of violation for selling alcohol to persons under 21. A Renee Selby completed the form. There is a photograph of a volunteer outside the store with a 12-pack bottle of Michelob Ultra. There's a vertical driver's license of a volunteer. That states the person is under 21 until 7/31/2021. I would ask that the file be entered into evidence.
We'll accept that into evidence. At this time, we do not have anyone appearing on behalf of the licensee.
Mr. Chairman, we are in the process of there he comes.
Okay, at this time, I would ask those who are intend to testify in this case, please stand and raise your right hand and be sworn in by Ms. Vance.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. At this time, Inspector Charles, I believe you're going to present the case on behalf of the commission.
Yes, sir.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, officers. Inspector Charles Carey from the Carroll County Liquor Board. On 9/8/2020 at 5:05 hours in the PM, I had an underage volunteer enter Piper's Lounge, located at 4127 Hanover Pike, to purchase alcohol. He went to the cold box and got a 12-pack of Michelob Ultra and took same to the front counter to pay for it. The volunteer was not asked for any form of ID, and the beer was sold to the volunteer. The clerk was Renee Selby. I spoke to Miss Selby, who is tip certified, and she stated the volunteer looked like a previous customer. All paperwork was completed and signed, and the volunteer was 20 years old on this date. I'd say I'll make a motion to have the two photographs entered into evidence, and that's
Piper's Wine and Spirits.
let me correct the location. The establishment is Piper's Wine and Spirits, and that will be our case.
We'll accept that into evidence. At this time, who is going to present your side of the case? Please state your name and address for the record, please.
You can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Rick Estes, 4127 Hanover Pike, West Manchester, Maryland.
You heard the statement of charges. How do you respond?
Well, first off, and I apologize for that, and there's no excuse, one, for not carding the individuals within the liquor store, number one. And that's the first thing, because after you card them, make sure that they're right. But if you don't card them at all, then there's no of preventing this from happening. So.
If I recall, just refresh my memory, I haven't been in your establishment for some time, but if I recall, it was difficult to come in the establishment not to be reminded that no sales would be made to anybody under 21. I forget the exact wording and so on and so forth throughout the store. Is that still the case?
Correct. I have signs. I have more signs now and posted very bright and all around the store, even more than previously. But yes, there's some signs that I have right at the counter, right in front, real large, right as you walk in the door. That's the signs that come as you walk in the door. And then we also have from We Card ID, new ones going on the front of each door. You can enter through two doors there on there as well. And right in front of the counter, I have the little board that says you must be as of this date, 1999, right in front of them, as well as if you were to probably see other picture that has the two in front of the counters. That picture has some Starburst ones facing the cashier that dictates, here's the date. There will be a Starburst on top of that, but here's the date, reminding them to card. On top of that, I also have a scanner system that anything that comes into the store that you need to be over 21 for will pop up on the screen that dictates you need to card this individual because the product is necessary of an individual over 21 years of age. So I have all of those in place, as well as paperwork for everybody to sign that they understand everything and our policies, and that they will be carding everyone.
Mr. Estes,
Go ahead.
are those additional signs new to the establishment, or have they been there the entire time?
Those signs are new. I didn't even show you the pictures of the existing sign that I had that was hanging from the ceiling. That was a big yellow sign that said, we will card everybody under 21. And if you pass this point, because we also have a convenience store that's in the front part of it that doesn't have alcohol that you can purchase. Once you pass a certain spot in our store, there's a big yellow sign that's above that that also dictates that the only people that can be there is with a parent.
Is this establishment, I'm trying to remember where Piper's is this the one on 30?
Yes.
Yes.
It's the
Okay.
closest one to Hanover, PA before you get there.
Yes, so you're not far from Hanover. I didn't see anything in your signs that says we do not accept vertical license. Do you accept vertical license?
We do not accept vertical licenses at all.
Even though you have no sign saying that?
No, but I can make a sign that does that. I mean, it's in our meetings and such, but I did not put a sign there that says that.
Okay. I noticed that you had a prior, and I think the hearing was 9/9/20, if I'm looking right.
No.
No, that's
No,
today.
that was April 10th.
For today, the one that we're talking about was the one before. I had one after that. Yes.
You had one
And that-
April, a hearing, in
And then
2009.
both hearings are today. They're
So
back. Both hearings are supposed to be today.
I'm looking at an old hearing. I'm looking at an old one from April 10th, 2019. That was a
That
hearing.
was the previous owner, Mr. Harmony, Commissioner Harmony.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
That was from Mr. Chenoweth. Yeah.
Oh, I have a question for Mr. Estes. The big yellow sign, did that come after the first violation or the second violation in November?
Neither. That first sign has been up there for the whole year.
I'm talking about the big yellow sign that has stop on it.
No, that one came at the second violation.
Okay.
Any further questions?
I
If
am,
there are no-
Mr. Estes, I'm looking at a carding policy document that you provided us along with pictures of the signs and so forth. And it looks like this carding policy is something that you submit to every employee that they sign and they acknowledge.
Yes, sir.
And I was happy to see that you put in this document that your employees must sign. Something that I would like to see every licensee do is have their server or clerk sign a document stating they understand it's a crime to serve a minor.
Absolutely.
It's not just a problem with the store owner, it's actually a problem with the state's attorney's office. And I think earlier, maybe last year, we sent out an email regarding the program that we implemented in association with the state's attorney's office, where people who sell to underage are referred to the state's attorney's office, and there's a deferral program of some sort. You're aware of that, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. Does everyone who works in your store, are they aware of that as well?
They are now.
Okay. Did you make them aware of it when you got that email from this board?
The first one, yes. When I got the people, well, you got to remind you that I don't have all the same employees that I had when that first came out. When that first came out, I just purchased the store. I've only been the owner of the store now a year, a little over a year. Yeah. So so the people who were here, yes, were made aware.
Right. So this was your first compliance check that we're here for right now.
In September.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And I would just encourage you to have every employee sign a simple form. It could be one sentence form that they understand that there is a possibility of a criminal violation against them if they sell to a minor, which is what you have in your carding policies. I think it should be highlighted and perhaps maybe add that you may be referred to the state's attorney's office. Just a thought.
Okay.
But I do appreciate that you've done this. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr.
Any
Estes,
other questions?
how many people work for you?
10.
You have 10 people in there that are selling alcohol then. Have you had, other than the letter that you designed, which is a very good letter, what's your in-house training? Do you have an in-house training program?
Yeah, well, every time when somebody comes in, we have personalized training with myself and the manager. And they go through a 2-week process that we're going through all of our training from, because they're not just cashiers that we have here. With multiple things at stores, we're a gas station, convenience store, and a liquor store all in one. So they do multiple facets of the business. So they go through the training process that how we're utilizing, how we're carding, how we do everything on that side of the house, and then they get the training and everything else. But the first part of the training is the POS system that we have, how you're supposed to handle customers, how you're supposed to card, how the system works. So it's about a 2-week process through our training.
Is everyone TAM certified?
I have everybody but one of our newest employees, because we haven't been able to do that yet. But everybody else, I believe 8 of our 10 are TAM certified. 2 of them are newer employees that we haven't had a chance to be able to do that yet, due to everything going on.
And how much do you work in that establishment?
A lot. I mean,
Every day.
I'm there every day. Yeah, pretty much.
And prior to you buying this business, have you had liquor stores in the past?
No, I haven't.
This is your first liquor store.
It is.
Okay.
Mr. Estes, when did you implement the scanner system at your point of service?
Well, I've had that in the system. I've had the scanning system in there for this whole year. I remodeled the store when I bought the store, and during the remodel, which finished in February, I had I added the POS system, the technology.
Okay, so for this particular incident on September 8th, 2020, was the scanner system available?
It was available. And here was the one issue that I'm talking to them about, how I can get around one of the problems that I had with it. Because I want to make this that you have to scan each one. Here's the problem. Some of the licenses and IDs are valid that no longer can scan, or they have a problem scanning and it won't go through. So it has to have the ability to bypass it. And I'm trying to get the POS system to allow me to, if I bypass it, right now you can bypass it and just click the button that says bypass. And that's just, it doesn't completely work, except for me making a policy that you have to card everybody. So I'm trying to find out if they can put in a birth date, that if it's not scanning, that at least makes them put their birth date in, that at least shows that they saw their card, because there's a fault in it that makes them have to bypass it in a way. So I guess there's a chink in the armor from the POS system I have currently.
Right, that'd be pretty cumbersome if they had to enter a birth date every time they make a sale of anyone
It
who.
would. I mean, I have the policy in place that says you will card everyone, and I make sure that all the customers know that, you know, that's why that sign is right in the front when they walk out. It says, be prepared to have your card, your license out, basically, so we can do it. But I have to have some kind of fallback on that they scan the item, and once they scan that item, it pops up on the screen, and it says, you know, this item needs to be checked, their ID needs to be checked. But there is a button, like I said, that you can push that bypasses it. And if they do that without, you know, me knowing, I don't get a chance to see that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out through the POS a more of a fail-safe way to make it happen. Because obviously we're strict on the carding process than we were.
Well, maybe one way would be a prompt where the clerk has to check off that they did check the ID. And the sale couldn't be made until they checked it instead of having to enter the, that's just a thought. I don't know.
If the software program can do it, I mean, I asked them what they could come up with for me. I'm sure they had this problem before.
Okay.
So I'm hoping to get that ironed out here shortly.
So, Mr. Estes, that system you have, let me see if I get this correct. They cannot make a purchase without checking the ID, except there is a button that they can press to bypass that. Is that correct?
That's correct. So when I plug in I took all 4,000 SKUs I have in this store, and when I plug them in, there's a button in there when I plug all them in that says what type of sale it is. If it's an alcohol sale, a convenience sale, or what have you. Any button that's clicked on alcohol sale, there's a button on there that clicks that says it must be an ID check. So that automatically pops up on the scanner that says check ID for this item. Okay. And that's they scan the item. Once they scan the item, it gave them the price, but it said check this ID. Then they can click that bypass button at that point. But it was supposed to be to remind them, hey, you need to check this. You need to check the ID because it pops up on the screen. But if you just keep pushing, if you just push the button, then I don't know, and it doesn't tell me who has bypassed it either. So I was just trying to figure out a better way.
So what happened in this instance is that that notice came up on the register that said check ID, but they didn't even ask for it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
One other question is Renee Selby still working for you?
She is.
Okay.
She was actually been here for 7 years. That's her first violation. It better be your only.
Mm-hmm.
And she was tip certified.
Yes.
Okay.
And she doesn't have to I checked on it. She's still certified for another year and a half, August of another year and a half. So.
There's no further testimony. Testimony is closed in this case. Now we move to summation. Inspector Charles, do you have any closing comments?
No, sir.
Mr. Estes, would you like to summarize or make any other comments?
No, I think I'm just pretty upset at the whole situation, to be honest with you. I do want to let you know that the day before the one happened, I have meetings every month to go over with with my 2 shifts. I usually have a morning shift and an evening shift because we're open even earlier because of gas and stuff. And for each month, and I had a meeting right prior to that. Hey guys, we're getting really busy in this season and all, and other things happen, but make sure you're doing all the right things and you're part of everybody, etc. And then this happened, like not too far after. It was very upsetting to me, and I apologize, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and checking these IDs. I mean, it's safety of the children as well, So I understand.
Mr. Estes, if I could make just one recommendation that might help your situation is that if you offered an incentive, like an employee gets $50 if they find or catch a sale or minor trying to come through, that might be incentivize them to instead of pressing that bypass button to make sure that they check everyone.
Okay. Look, that's way worth it to me. I'll tell you that.
With that said, we will now move into the discussion phase of the case. Commissioners, you have heard testimony. Further comments, motions, or what?
Mr. Chairman, I would note that this was unfortunately the first compliance check for this licensee, and it was a failure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I interject there?
Sure.
I'm sorry. That's not my first compliance check. That's my first fail.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. That's what I meant to say. Your first failure.
Okay. Sorry.
However, you are Piper's Wine and Spirit Barn, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, on my flow sheet, I don't have any prior compliance checks. How many times have you passed a compliance check?
I'd have to look in the file, but I just have one in the mail that I passed, and I believe there was at least 2 prior since I've had that we've.
You did a
Yeah, and we had I guess a recheck last week that I just got.
11:30. No, wait a minute. When was the?
That's a
Mr.
look-
Estes,
Yes.
I know you're somebody is prompting you, so in the next case, I want to identify whoever that person is. But testimony in this case is closed.
Okay. Yeah, she swore in when I swore. It's my manager, Julie, who's been here 26 years.
Okay.
So yeah, you can re-swear her in if you like, or she was standing.
Commissioners, you've heard all the testimony. Now we're in the discussion phase for penalties.
Yes.
Okay.
At any rate, going back to my discussion of the penalties, I am pleased to see that you made some changes, it looks like. I especially like, as I mentioned earlier, your carding policy, which you require employees to sign. I think that's a good idea. I encourage you to enhance in bold in the language the fact that they can be personally charged with a crime if they sell alcohol to a minor. I think a lot of problems that we're having with underage sales is that the clerk or the server is not fully aware that they may get sent over to the state's attorney's office because it's a crime in Maryland. So that's a suggestion. Unless they're now, so this would be the first violation for this licensee, and I would be prepared to make a motion, but I would certainly listen to any further comments from or discussion from the other commissioners.
Well, I think there's a couple things that you could do that could help you, Mr. Estes. One is I would definitely put up signs, no vertical license, to discourage anybody from even coming in there with vertical license. You're so close to Hanover, PA, and they can maintain their license vertically much longer than they can in Maryland. And the second thing is maybe initiate an incentive program. I think those two things would help you. You're kind of behind the 8 ball because this is the first time you've ever owned a liquor store. So I think what you're doing, I think is great. And you are it seems like you're taking it serious to me with the policies that you have behind you. And especially with the letter that you make your employees sign. And I do agree with Commissioner Barnhart that you should add in there that could be a federal offense to them or is a federal offense to them. But I think you are trying with your limited experience owning a liquor store, I think you're trying to prevent any sale to minors.
A motion would be in order, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I move that we, in case 6262, that we find the licensee, Rick Estes, culpable for sale to a minor, and that we assess a fine in the amount of $300.
Is there a second to the motion?
I would second that, Chairman.
Motion's been properly made and seconded that we find the licensee culpable in case 6262. and issue a fine of $300. You've heard the motion. Is there any further discussion? Any? Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. So ordered. Mr. Estes, we find you culpable and issue a fine of $300 in the case 6262, of which you will have 30 days in which to satisfy the fine upon written notice of this action. Therefore, that concludes 6262. Now, Mr. Dixon, would you call 6288, please?
Okay. Case 6288, a Class A beer, wine, and liquor license issued to Rick Estes for the use of Estes and Associates LLC, trading as Piper's Wine and Spirit Barn, 4127 Hanover Pike, Manchester, Maryland, 21102, violation hearing sale to a minor. In the file of this matter, we have the following documents: carding policies, a sample, and 3 signs of photos of signs in the store. There is a notice of intention to defend with the box checked. I do not intend to contest the alleged violation. Signed December 2nd, 2020. Looks like R. Estes. Acknowledged receipt of a letter dated September 1st, 2020, delivered by hand on December 2nd, 2020. Received by R. Estes. Is a December 1st, 2020 letter from Joe Vance to Rick Estes. And there is a alcohol compliance violation sheet dated November 30th, 2020, and completed and signed by Charles Carey. There is a notice of violation for selling alcohol to persons under 21 on State's Attorney's letterhead, Brian L. D. Leonardo, for Samantha Lynn Alisi. There is a vertical driver's license that indicates the volunteer is under 21 until 7/31/2021. There's a photograph of the volunteer outside the store with a Coors Light, a 12-pack of Coors Light. I would ask that the file be entered into evidence.
We'll accept that into evidence. At this time, I would ask all of those who intend to testify in this case, please stand, raise your right hand, and be sworn in by Ms. Vance.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Inspector Charles, are you going to present this case on behalf of the commission?
Yes, sir.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Again, good afternoon. Inspector Charles Carey, Carroll County Liquor Board. On 11/30/2020 at 4:20 p.m., I sent an underage volunteer back into Piper's Wine Spirits Bar, located at 4127 Hanover Pike, to purchase an alcoholic beverage. The volunteer went to the cold box and obtained a 12-pack of Coors Light. He took this to the seller, Miss Samantha Alisi, who did not ask for any form of ID, and completed the sale. I entered the store and interviewed the seller, Miss Alisi, who stated she did not ask the volunteer, who was 20 years old, for any form of ID. She could not provide a reason other than he looked old enough to make the purchase. All paperwork was completed and signed for. I'd also like to make a motion to submit our 2 photographs into evidence.
We'll accept that into evidence. Mr. Estes, your comments as to what occurred and why it occurred, please, on your behalf?
You know, again, there's still no excuse for that. I mean, there was not even wasn't even asked for the card that they could even make a mistake on reading it or what have you. Her only excuse was that he looked older, he had a beard and a receding hairline. He's still, regardless, the policy is to card everybody, and there's no excuse for it. I mean, I just, as I told you before, and that was when I had the meeting that day on the shift before it happened. So I don't have an excuse for that.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
Yeah, Mr. Estes, when this second occurrence happened, you were aware of the first violation, correct?
Yes, sir.
And was your clerk, Samantha Alessi, aware of the first violation that came a couple of months earlier?
She was.
She still work for you?
She does. She just finished her class this week. I mean, the violation just happened not too long ago. She just finished her just last week.
Right.
So
So she wasn't trained in alcohol management then?
Correct.
Were you on the premises at the time of the second violation?
I was not out front. I was in the back office.
Okay. Well, I guess you can appreciate that this is a bad look for Piper's Wine and Spirit Barn to have a follow-up inspection be failed after you're put on notice that these things are happening.
Yes, sir. I realize that. We did pass a follow-up one after that also, but it got a lot more stringent from that. I mean, as you saw, I added the policy of filling out the paper, making sure that crystal clear that they're aware that this is a criminal offense. I made sure that they know all the, and all the reasons behind it. It says, this is not just carding somebody. You remember, you got younger people out there who's going to be getting alcohol, and also with what's going on these days, they could do some harm to somebody else, themselves. There's all kinds of other things that are lying, that are underlying from serving a minor. Not the fact that it's just a rule. There's a lot more that goes involved in that. So I had individual meetings with everybody in reference to it, not just a group meeting, so I can make it crystal clear how important this is.
And you said you had a follow-up compliance check that you passed after the November 30th check?
I received a letter in the mail that said that, yes.
And what was the date of that? That was pretty recent then.
That was real recent. That was, hold on, I have it here. December 2nd.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Estes, it seems to me like your employees are not following your policies. They're pressing the bypass button all the time. So why would they do that? Did you explain to them when that comes up on the register, the check ID, that's what they're supposed to do?
Absolutely.
And both these employees are still working for you?
Yes, the first employee has been with us for 7 years and never had that problem. We had never had any of those issues, none of those problems, nothing. I mean, it's one of my best employees on a regular basis. So it really befuddled me that even happened to begin with. And to be honest, it's kind of, if I put it this way, I can come take somebody from a retail establishment and I can just fire them right away. They can go someplace else and do it again. Or we can coach them and teach them on the proper way to do things, and to make sure that they take the class that they were offered to take, and to make it better in the future. So but keeping that in mind, I can't let that keep happening. So, they need to know that this is an offense that will lose you your job also, on top of being able to have a criminal offense and go to court and do all those other things that you don't want to have happen. So that's kind of the thought process there. I think that, we can make it better and let them learn from this here and make sure that it doesn't happen again, opposed to just firing them. They don't take the class, they go do what they do something someplace else.
So is your policy now that everyone must be TAMS or TIP certified?
Yes. But currently, like I said, I have 2 that are not, but it's a little tougher to schedule a TAM class.
Tell me, I want you to tell me what's the easiest way to tell if someone is underage?
By checking their ID. What do you mean by tell? By visually?
What do you look for on that ID? If they present you with an ID, what do you look for?
Well, you have the hologram that you have on the ID. You have their, I mean, of course, you're looking for their date of birth. That's down on the
What's easy?
picture to make not. Well, I mean, one, you're looking to see it's not vertical. You tell that right away.
Okay,
Two,
so
to
if you
see
never
that.
have a vertical license, you never get caught, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do you also have the rules and regulation book from the Carroll County Liquor Board?
We do, the blue.
The blue one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we do have an updated copy if you would like to pick that up.
Okay, absolutely.
I think that book is yellow. Is that what we're talking about? The yellow book?
Yellow now.
It was blue. We have the blue one.
Yeah, the blue one. Okay.
The latest edition is yellow.
Okay.
Mr. Estes, I have a question. You had mentioned that Ms. Selby was with you for 7 years, but I don't understand. You just acquired that.
Well,
store.
she's here at the store for 7 years. Like my manager's been here 26 years. Not for myself, but I'm saying for the business in the store, Mr. Chenoweth and Associates. She's been here 7 total years.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you for that.
And I'm sorry, 27,
Yeah,
not 26 years.
yeah, it's okay.
Mr. Estes, who would have been working in your store this past Saturday, say around noon?
It would have been us 3.
It'd be myself, Renee, Selby, Julie Parkins, who's the manager, and probably I think Joanne,
Or Mary. No, it was Mary.
Mary, or maybe Mary. I can look at the schedule. It's right over the other side of the room. If you
The
know
only reason I ask you that question, based upon all of the comments that you made previously, I can tell you a friend of mine happened to stop by your establishment who is a regular customer,
Mm-hmm.
who is 53 years old and was asked to show her ID before she went any further.
Good.
So somebody is doing what they're supposed to be.
Good. Thank you for that.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Harmony, do you have any further questions?
I have no further questions.
Evidence has been presented, is now closed, and we will hear summaries. Inspector Carey, do you have any closing remarks?
Oh, no, sir.
Mr. Estes, do you have any closing comments?
No, sir.
Hearing none, testimony is now closed, and the commission will discuss the merits of the case as presented and make our decisions. Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, I would go ahead and not have to reiterate what I said in the first case about the things that I like that Mr. Estes has done. In this case, it's very concerning that this was a follow-up compliance check that was failed about a month after the prior, or 2 months after the prior failure. At any rate, that doesn't happen very often, at least since I've been on the board. We're starting to see it today in several cases, but I'm not sure I've seen it very often before today. And of course, why it's bothersome is that the store is now on notice that they're being checked. They failed. and that they should be extra vigilant. Even though they should have been vigilant to begin with, now they should be extra vigilant, uber vigilant, and they weren't. That is concerning to me. So this will be the second violation in just a matter of months for this licensee.
Commissioner Barnhart, I agree with you. I think the significance here is wasn't much done policy-wise between the first and the second, or the seriousness to have a second one just a couple months after the first. I think that's an important fact, and we don't see that a lot. I agree with you. So with all that taken into account, I would make a motion if the chairman agrees with that.
Yes, sir. Please proceed.
Well, I would, the thing that really bothers me is the follow-up positive, the follow-up failure that happened in this store. Even with everything that is present, the identification, the employees aren't following the policies. Maybe it wasn't stressed enough by Mr. Estes how important it is for them to do that. Maybe they know there's no threat of losing their job if a mistake is done. I'm not sure. But with all that said, I find him, Mr. Estes, culpable of sale to minor on a second time. And I make a motion to fine him $800.
Is there a second to the motion?
I would second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion has been properly made and seconded that we find the licensee culpable and assess a fine of $800. A proper second has made. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
No, sir.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. So ordered. Mr. Estes, we find you culpable and assess a fine under case 6288 of $800, of which you will have 30 days upon written notice of this decision to satisfy the fine. Are there any further questions?
No, sir.
If not, I know that your store has been pestered with signs quite prominently. The bad problem is it seems as though the request for IDs was rather lax by seasoned employees. And I know that you've taken steps to improve upon that in the future, but however the results of this commission stands, we wish you the best of luck and hope we do not see you here again in this same situation.
I hope the same.
This concludes case 6288. The next schedule on my list says lunch break. So we will adjourn until 2 o'clock